Our reading this morning is from our book of the month, the Sermon on the Mount by Emmett Fox. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called children of God. To be a peacemaker in the usual sense of composing the quarrels of other people is an excellent thing. But as all practical people know, an excessively difficult role to fill. By interfering in other people's strife, it is ever so much easier to make things worse than to make them better. Personal opinion is almost certain to enter into your efforts, and personal opinion is exceedingly likely to be wrong. If you can get people concerned to take a new view of the matter in controversy, that of course is well. But otherwise, if you merely bring about a compromise in which they consent to agree from motives of self-interest or as the result of some kind of coercion, then the trouble has only been patched up on the surface, and there is no true peace because they are not satisfied and forgiving. As long as there is fear or resentment or any trouble in your heart, as long as you lack serenity or peace, it is not possible for you to attain very much. The peacemakers spoken of in this beatitude are those who make or bring about this true peace or serenity in their own souls, for it is they who surmount limitation and become actually and not merely potentially children of God. Serenity you must have. And it is serenity, that fundamental tranquility of soul that Jesus refers to by the word peace, the peace that passes all human understanding. Serenity is the grand passport to the presence of God. I kind of feel more peaceful than I did when I got here this morning. How about you? Breathe with me. Allow your shoulders to drop. Just release any tension that you might be holding in your body. And see if you can't embody a greater sense of peacefulness and serenity. How many Seinfeld fans do we have? How many Seinfeld fans have heard that infamous line, "Serenity now"? Do you feel like that sometimes? In case you're not familiar with that, in case you're not a Seinfeld fan, it all started with this one scene where George Costanza's father had high blood pressure, so his doctor gave him a meditation tape, and although we never hear the meditation tape itself, his interpretation of what's on the meditation tape is that the person facilitating the meditation is saying, "Serenity now!" And if you know the character, you know that George Costanza's father is a little excitable. But you know, there have been times in my life when I haven't been feeling a lot of peace, and when I have been doing the equivalent of "Serenity now, damn it!" I need to feel better now. And trying to get something outside of me to create a sense of peace inside of me. And do you think serenity now is going to get me there? But isn't that how we try and do a lot of things? We demand it. We look for it out there instead of allowing it to bubble up from deep within. Blessed are the peacemakers. The peacemakers. Peace, what is that? What is serenity? What is peace? Well, I looked them both up in the dictionary, and what I found is that serenity is a state of being calm, peaceful, or tranquil. like a little more serenity, a little more state of being calm, peaceful, tranquil in your life. And interestingly enough, the Latin root of the word serenity means calm, clear weather. Isn't that cool? Like, what's the weather like? Calm and clear? Or serenity now? Stormy. Not so clear. And the word peace means freedom from disturbance. The Latin root is pax, P-A-X, which is the same word as pact, P-A-C-T. And a pact is an agreement, isn't it? If you have a pact for peace, you are covenanting or agreeing to be peaceful among one another. That is, you are agreeing that serenity now is going to be our way of being together. So peacemakers bring about this state of covenant, this state of agreement, so that we can be in peaceful relationship with one another and experience a greater sense of calm and tranquility, serenity. Now that's sounding pretty good to me. Am I a peacemaker? Am I a peacemaker? Now, it's an interesting word, isn't it? Thinking about peacemakers. It's people, when someone is making something, what are you doing? You're doing something. You're creating something. If you are a peacemaker, you're doing something. You are about making peace with yourself, with others. Some of us need to do some peacemaking with God. If you are a peacemaker, you are in a practice of becoming peaceful, practicing making peace. And notice the Beatitude does not say, blessed are the peace wishers, blessed are the peace talkers, blessed are the peace dreamers. It doesn't even say, blessed are the peace filled. It says, blessed are the ones who are doing something about peace, the peacemakers. Are you a peacemaker? Sometimes. A little bit. Or are you a troublemaker? I know that I maybe kind of go back and forth between being a peacemaker and a troublemaker, but you know, the bottom line is that peace must be made. Peace must be made. It doesn't just happen. And when we are making peace, it might be messy. It might be risky. You might have to be vulnerable. When we are making peace, time and commitment is required of you. Courage is required of you. It's kind of like, I like to sew. And when I decide to make something, I don't just throw the pattern and the fabric and the thread in a pile on my table and say, make yourself. Right? I actually lay out the fabric and I put a pattern on it and I cut things out and I put the thread in the machine and I sew and then I make mistakes and I rip it out. Damn. And I do it again. And actually the other week I wanted to make this handbag and I cut it out wrong. It was supposed to be like a big tote kind of handbag and it turned out being a little teeny tiny bag because I cut it out wrong. But you know what? There's two ways to be with that, right? I can be at peace and go, oh, well, I guess God wanted to make a little tiny 8-inch handbag today instead of a big 16-inch handbag today, right? I can be at peace with it or not. So if anybody wants a little 8-inch handbag, it's really cute. It's not very practical. But you see, it's messy, it's risky, it takes time. And sometimes when we are about making peace, we bring up the appearance of strife. But we recognize that that's just a symptom of the healing, isn't it? It's just a symptom of becoming a peacemaker. And so it could be that it feels impossible to make peace. Anybody feel a little helpless around bringing more peace to the world? Because it's risky. You have to be vulnerable. It takes time. It takes courage. It takes commitment. It's about doing something, not sitting around wishing for something. And you know, you could be right. It could be impossible. In fact, I am sure it is impossible for me personally to create peace in the world. In fact, it's even impossible for me personally to create peace in my own life. But here's what I know. Through Christ Jesus, all things are possible. We are told, I can do all things through Christ, which strengthens me. And remember, we're not talking about Jesus the man. When I say that, we are talking about Christ the consciousness. In my human consciousness, I can do nothing. I'll be a peace wisher or a peace dreamer or a peace talker. But with the Christ consciousness of infinite love, infinite beauty, infinite peace, strengthens all things are possible. God consciousness can do anything because it is unlimited and infinite. My human consciousness is only as big as I am. But if I can tap into that Christ consciousness, understand that I can do all things through the mind of God, and then practice and embody that mind of God, I can become a peacemaker, cultivating serenity now. Becoming a peacemaker, being a peacemaker. And what are the two things I have to do to get that consciousness and be a peacemaker? The first thing is I got to pray. Yeah, every day, whether I need it or not. Because you see, prayer is what lifts us in consciousness. I don't pray for peace. I don't pray for more of this. I don't pray for more of that. I pray for the consciousness of God to be as me so that I can be about the work. I pray for an expansion of my awareness of God as all things. I pray for understanding. With all thy getting, get understanding. I pray for awareness. I pray for an expansion and growth. I pray for evolution in who I am. Prayer is nothing but a movement in consciousness. Over here in this state of consciousness, I thought I couldn't be peaceful. I thought I couldn't be a peacemaker. But over here, I align with the bigger consciousness of God through the practice of prayer. And suddenly, something is possible through me. I can become a peacemaker. So my first step is to pray. This is where everything starts. The New Testament also tells us, expect tribulation. We're in a human experience. Expect tribulation, but find peace in God. And as we align with that peace, suddenly we find ourselves available to be a peacemaker because we can embody the greater idea. And it's funny how that consciousness is infectious, isn't it? It's powerful to be around somebody with big consciousness. You may not even know exactly what it is, but you feel it. Have you felt it before? I know I have. And just being in the energetic of somebody who knows the spiritual truth about themselves and about me has changed my experience of a thing. Now, shortly before he was crucified, Jesus said, "Peace I leave with you. My peace I give to you, not as the world gives." Not as the world gives. Not that temporary peace. Has it ever been, a gift? You feel a sense of gratitude and peace suddenly. But you know what, a half an hour later you don't? That's as the world gives. But Jesus told us, I give you peace. That is, as you embody the Christ consciousness that I stand before you as an example of, you will experience peace. even had his moments, didn't he? And so when we talk about going back and forth between it being a peacemaker and a troublemaker, I mean, Jesus was, found himself in that troublemaker consciousness a few times, didn't he? So he stands before us not only as the example of how to be, but also as sometimes we get stuck in our humanness. And we don't judge, and we don't make ourselves wrong for that. We just notice it, see what we can learn from, and move on. How many of you have been beating yourself up for something that you did or said, in some cases for years? Just stop it. Let it go. No. My peace I give to you. My peace I give to you, not as the worldly peace, not what the world gives. But as we open our minds and anchor in the consciousness of the Christ, we actually truly experience serenity in the nowness of the consciousness of God. And so how do we do this? I said there's two things. You got to pray every day, anchoring in that consciousness. And the challenge is prayer by itself isn't enough, is it? If prayer was enough, the world would be peaceful. Plus, peacemaking is what? It's a doing. Prayer is about the consciousness piece. And now we go out in the world and we practice. And I'm not talking about practicing being at peace. Yeah, you want to practice being at peace, but you want to also practice making peace. So how do we make peace? First is how we don't make peace. We don't make peace by avoiding the situation. We don't make peace by appeasing. I was raised to make peace by appeasing. How about you? Well, just keep the peace. Just do what that person wants or do what you think is going to keep things peaceful. We don't make peace by appeasement or by accommodation because that's glossing over the issue, isn't it? And there's no true peace there. There may be external peace, but where is the internal peace? You're not feeling peaceful about it. You just appeased and glossed it over and accommodated it, didn't you? And there's no healing there. What I'm talking about is the peace that passes understanding, the peace that is the consciousness of Jesus. Do you think Jesus was holding on to stuff? I don't think so. So as we embody that consciousness, we find ourselves able to actually really be peacemakers because the only way out is through. I'm going to say that again. The only way out of our turmoil and discontent is through. Not by appeasing, not by accommodating, not by trying to make anybody happy or make things okay. We have to move through it. Courage, commitment, consciousness, awareness. And this is where sometimes peacemaking brings up what looks like less peace. But healing always brings up everything unlike itself. Healing always brings up everything unlike healing. Until it's healed. It's kind of like if you break your leg and you put a Band-Aid on it, how's that going to heal? Yeah, you covered it up, you kind of appeased it, and it's going to heal crooked, and you're going to limp for the rest of your life, and it's never going to be okay, because all you did was kind of cover it up. The only way to really have that heal is to set it, which is painful, and might look like strife, and yet what you get is a good, clean healing. And so the only way out is to move through the conflict to a sense of peace. In our practice, we always have to start with ourselves, right? Sorry about that. But it always starts right here, right? Where are you not at peace with yourself? What are your fears? What are your vulnerabilities? What are the things that you beat yourself up for? What are the things that you're holding against you? What are the resentments that you're holding against others? See, we always start within, making peace with our own hearts. And we do this through the work that we're doing, showing up here, taking classes, seeing our therapist or our spiritual counselor. We make peace with ourselves by doing our spiritual practice on a regular basis. And as stuff comes up, we simply bless it and see what it is here to teach us and move through it. You know, why are we here? We're here to grow. We're on the planet to grow, people. Everything is growing. Do you know the only ones who resist growth are us? Humans. Trees don't resist growth. Tomato plants don't resist growth. The only ones who resist growing and evolving into something greater are us. And you see, these are tricks of the ego. These are ways that the ego tries to stay in charge of our lives. But if we can allow ourselves to step into that greater consciousness through our spiritual practice and recognize we're here to learn and grow and evolve, that's it. Then we're able to do the work. And I use the term work in the most positive way. It's an opportunity for us to just be about embodying more of the Christ consciousness in our relationship with ourselves. What are my fears? What are my vulnerabilities? What are the things that are stopping me from evolving and growing? And we begin to make peace with those things. And we find ourselves set free to be children of God. That's the promise of this beatitude, isn't it? And then, in our practice, we must also make peace with others. Anybody you're holding something against in your life? Any resentments about others? Any unforgiveness happening for you? Here's what Jesus taught us about that. In the book of Matthew, he says something to the effect of, if you're offering your gift at the altar and you remember that your brother or sister has something against you, leave your gift, go be reconciled, and then come back. In other words, if you want to really show up expressing who you are and your gifts in life at the altar of life, and you're holding resentments or others are holding resentments against you, you're never going to be able to show up in your full godness self. Because that's so unlike the nature of the Infinite One. So go. Just put it all down. This is important, but it's not the most important thing right now. The most important thing right now is to be a peacemaker and make peace with your brothers and your sisters. Oh, and your parents and your kids and your coworkers and your bosses and all of those people that you are holding resentments against and who might be holding resentments against you. And if you do that in that Christ consciousness, in the consciousness of love, something will be healed, something will be transformed. If we do it in a consciousness of, well, Reverend Marla says I got to go fix this, so I'm going to go confront my mom this week, you might not like your result. But to truly embody the Christ consciousness of love, and to be vulnerable and to be real, and go to your brother or sister with genuine, heartfelt concerns and an intention of reconciliation and peacemaking. And very importantly, no attachment to the outcome, because that person may not be ready. But you gave it your best. You made peace for yourself. And somehow you may have just moved the needle a little bit for them, but you moved it. Because there was that movement in consciousness for you. And the movement in consciousness floats all boats, right? The rising tide floats all boats. There's two other pieces of making peace with others that are really important. Don't talk about non-peace things with people. It's gossip, right? Don't gossip. Just stop it. That is not coming from that Christ consciousness. And by gossip, I mean anything that you wouldn't say if that person is in the room, don't say it. Anything that you wouldn't say if you thought that person was going to hear a recording of the conversation, don't say it. That stirs up strife, creates conflict. That's being a troublemaker, not a peacemaker. That's practicing being a troublemaker. And planting seeds. You know the interesting thing about planting seeds? I kind of only realized this very recently. Do you know if you plant one tomato seed, you get a whole bunch of tomatoes? Do you know if you plant one chrysanthemum seed, you get a bucket load of chrysanthemums? And God help us, if you plant one zucchini seed, do you know how much zucchini you get? If you plant one seed of fear, of hate, how does that multiply? One seed. And gossiping is just planting seeds of fear and hate and lack and limitation. So let's make peace with others by being peaceful about them from the very beginning, so that we don't have to make peace with them later. Be a peacemaker. Be about being peace, not stirring up strife and conflict just for the sake of it. And then I said, some of us, in our practice of being peacemakers, some of us need to make peace with God. Anybody holding any resentments, fears, opinions of anything but love and joy and beauty around God? I know that, for me, I was raised to understand God as angry and judgmental, and I had fears. I was kind of afraid of God. It was an interesting thing because I never was afraid of Jesus. I think it's because, that song, Jesus Loves Me? Jesus loves me, this I know. We sang that like all the time in Sunday school and Vacation Bible School and all that. And I believed that. I believed that. Jesus loves me just how I am. I don't have to do anything. But at the same time, I was getting a message of a judgmental, mean, angry God. And I needed to make peace with that in my heart and come to understand God as the source of all joy, all beauty, all grace, all perfection, all wholeness. And that, yes, indeed, I really do want to be a child of God. Who would want to be that guy's kid? Not me. But I do want to be a child of peace and grace and wholeness and wisdom and power and beauty. Yes, I want to be the child of that. And that might bring up the appearance of strife, yes? And yet the only way out is through. Healing always brings up everything unlike healing until the healing is complete. It's like when I know you've heard this metaphor before, when you pour more water into into a glass of muddy water, all the mud that is settled to the bottom stirs up. But if you pour long enough, all the mud comes out, and you end up with a glass of pure, clean water. And if I can do all of this, if I can become a true peacemaker, I will be called a child of God. Now, what does it mean to be called a child of God? It is to be known as or designated as belonging to God. What does it mean to be a child of the person you're a human child of? It means you belong to that person. You have their DNA. You look like them, maybe. What? I would want to look more like grace and peace and beauty and joy and wisdom. I would want to have a greater experience of all the good that God is. Have you ever looked at a young one and said, oh, she looks just like her father? Or interestingly, my sisters and I were together this last week, and we were talking about how much we are starting to look number one, like one another. And number two, like our mom. It's like, oh my God, we're all starting to look exactly like mom. What? But you see, I want to look like God. I want to look like God. I want to be known. You will be called children of God. I want to be called a child of beauty, of grace, of power, of peace. I want to be known as that. I want God's DNA to shine forth through me and as me. And if I can become a peacemaker, if I can embody that Christ consciousness, which is characteristic of the nature of God, I am blessed. It's almost like a positive feedback cycle. I become a better peacemaker. Like, which came first, the chicken or the egg, right? Which came first, being a peacemaker or embodying the nature of God? We have to have both. To do the one, we have to do the other. To do the one, we have to do the other. And I find myself anchoring even more fully in the infinite peace of the infinite mind. And blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called children of God. I must pray and I must practice. I must lift myself in consciousness, and then I must do something in the world. So let's lift ourselves in consciousness right now as we move into an awareness, a greater awareness of the infinite nature of God. I invite you now to bring your attention to your breath, to just feel that mantle of peace descend upon you right here and right now as you relax fully and completely into your chair. And you feel your shoulders drop and your jaw softens and all of your joints soften and every cell comes into alignment with the perfection, the wholeness, the allness of God. And right here and right now, I invite you to open your conscious awareness to a greater idea. A greater idea of God as peace. Every tendril of your mind just easing and relaxing. Opening more and more fully to something greater than we are. We call it God. It is energy, it is essence, it is the infinite. It is that circle whose limits are nowhere, whose center is everywhere. It is right where we are. And I invite you now to simply make yourself available to this awareness, to feel the movement in consciousness in you that says, yes, I belong to the universe. I belong to God. I belong to the infinite one, the living one. And it lives me and moves me and breathes me every moment of every day. And so I simply surrender to that awareness. And I allow God to live me more fully than I ever have before. And in this awareness, you find complete peace, complete serenity now, calm, tranquility, ease now. And you simply know that this touchstone, this feeling is available to you anytime. For you know now that you belong to something greater than you are. And you are connected to it and indeed to all things. You cannot be separate from it. And there is a great and mighty peace in your heart and in your mind and in your soul as you embody this Christ consciousness, this consciousness of love, of peace, the Prince of Peace, right where you are. And so it's with a grateful heart that I close this message, knowing that we leave here ready to practice in a new way, making peace with ourselves, with others, with God, making peace in a new way, knowing that we are indeed children of the infinite and cannot be separate from it. Calling it good and very good, I simply say, and so it is.